that he is willing to miss the first quarter of the opening game of the New York Knickerbocker basketball team. If you know my brother Jerry, that is a major sacrifice. We appreciate it. We appreciate all of you being here. I have said before, and I say it again, if you are here, you're a participant. If you're out there, you're a spectator. We understand why many people are choosing to be spectators at this time. We look forward to the time that we can all be together. But for now, for those who are here, we welcome all of you. I want to give a special thank you to Chana Slavatitsky and to her able assistant, Shira Zertin-Sharp, for putting together all of the programs that we put on here at Beth Villa, and they are really unique and beautiful. This is a special year, our 100th anniversary. You are here in person, had a preview of our centennial timeline, and it is just a masterpiece. All of you out there, you are going to be pleasantly surprised when you see it. Of all of our achievements over the course of 100 years, perhaps the most remarkable is the fact that Beth Villa has only had 3 rabbis. When you think about it, that really is remarkable. And that's the tribute to all of you. And as I pass the mantle to Rabbi Posner and move into the position of Rabbi in residence, and that's what I intend to be, in residence, we wanted to wrap up my term of office by reflecting on some of the issues that were central to my thinking and speeches and activities. Really, I did very little beyond Beth Villa. Beth Villa became my life. And here at Beth Villa, there were certain subjects that captured my attention and focus. Israel, and we're going to have as our guest next week, Daniel Gordis, who is not only an outstanding speaker about Israel, but is a graduate of our day school. I developed an interest late in life in black and white relations, and we're going to have a night here with my dear friend, and he really is a dear friend, Terrace King. And then we're going to spend the night looking at the future of Beth Villa and the Baltimore Jewish community with Dr. Shur and Rabbi Posner. I didn't have to think of anybody to speak about politics, which has been so much a part of my life as a rabbi. Since I was 16, I have been involved in politics. I was sick that summer. I was in bed for 3 weeks, and it was the year of the conventions where John F. Kennedy was chosen. And ever since, I've been strongly interested in politics, because to me, politics is life. Immigration, integration, abortion, gender issues. This is not politics. This is also religion. And to get a perspective on politics, I didn't have to look far to see who to discuss it with. How many rabbis have a senator in the House? I just want to read you 2 things I've said about Ben Cardin. The first was said in 1987, when he was first elected to the House of Representatives. I was there for the inauguration, and I spoke about it the following Shabbos in the shul, and this is the exact words I spoke. This past Tuesday, a member of our own congregation, whom we all deeply respect, Ben Cardin, was sworn in as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. This is an extremely high honor, one that all of us who know Ben consider him worthy of. After his being sworn in on the floor of Congress, a reception is held in his honor in the House office building from 1 to 3 p.m. I went to Washington to attend the reception because I consider myself honored to be the rabbi of one of our country's leaders. And that's what Ben is. But he is more than that. When the reception was over, I returned here to the synagogue and walked past the chapel. Mincha afternoon services had already begun, and there was Ben. He had yahrzeit that night for his mother. So here he was with his brother Howard and Father Meyer. On such a great momentous day in his life, a day in which he had been sworn in as a leader in our country, he still remembered the importance of his links and rootedness to his family. He still remembered what was truly important and significant in life. Such a leader speaks well for our country and for our people. In 2019, when Ben was re-elected to the Senate, that Shabbos, I spoke these words. Did you ever wonder who are the people that watch C-SPAN at 3 o'clock in the morning? One of them is my brother Saul. A few months ago, he called me, and knowing that Ben is a member of the congregation, he said, you know, I saw Ben Cardin on TV in the middle of the night. He reminds me of the people who used to be senators when we were growing up. People like Javits and Humphrey and Dirksen and Aiken and Simonton. These were real solid guys. These were guys who had to respect. They don't make them like that anymore. Ben Cardin reminds me of them. I'm honored to call upon the distinguished member of our congregation who has been a member of the Beth Tefillah congregation all his life, Senator Ben Cardin.
Rabbi Wohlberg, thank you for that very, very generous introduction. I thought as I was listening to you talk about your love for politics, that now that you're going to be a rabbi in residence, that you were going to announce your candidacy for public office. If that's the case, I just need to know where to write the check out. And it is true that I have been a member of Beth Tefillah for my entire life. And no, that's not 100 years. It's not the whole centennial. But it's a good part of that centennial. It's good to be here with Myrna and Deborah, both who have been members of Beth Tefillah. And we must be somebody, because according to my father, I was looking at the timeline. To be anybody, you have to be a member of Beth Tefillah. I never argue with my dad. So it really is wonderful to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the State of the Union. So I'm going to give you my view of the State of the Union through the eyes of the U.S. Senator, but a Jewish American who's deeply rooted in the Jewish community here in Baltimore and grew up with parents who instilled upon me the values that are important to the Jewish community. I know Rabbi Wohlberg has a closely knit family. I can't understand Saul being up 3 a.m. in the morning, but I'll get over that. I was not speaking on the floor of the Senate at 3 a.m. in the morning. Let's get that straight. That'd be a rerun. I wouldn't be talking in any sensible way at that time in the morning. But let me just share with you the values that I take to everything I do in life, which is rooted in Beth Tefillah, the Jewish community. And I really do celebrate these 100 years through that timeline, centennial timeline, which is amazing. So those of you that are watching online, you have a real treat for you your next visit to the synagogue to see that timeline. It's just incredible. But my family instilled upon me the value, importance of Zionism, the importance of tzedakah, the importance of tikkun olam, and the importance of civility. I can tell you that Zionism was critically important in our life. My parents grew up during the times where Jews were not welcomed anywhere, and they recognized what happened during World War II and took great pride in the creation of the State of Israel, a modern State of Israel, as a democratic state. And I must tell you, in our family, we did everything we could to support the new State of Israel. We would always, on any occasion, on any event, it could be after a snowstorm, getting home safely at our house, we would put money into pushing the Jewish National Fund Blue Book to help the State of Israel. It was part of our life. We recognized that it was so important for the survival of Jews that the state of Israel thrive and grow. We recognized tzedakah, that we had a responsibility to help those that were not as fortunate as we were. We talked about that all the time. It wasn't only by our financial resources, but it was by what we did with our time, helping other people. It was part of who we were. To come along, help the world, to help people that we don't know, that don't come from our country. But the wealth that we have needs to be shared to make the world a safer place. And civility. For those who knew my family, you would know that we always spoke with deep respect for each other. My parents would not tolerate any type of reaction that would show disrespect for anyone. We listened to each other, and we respected each other's views. And we didn't always agreed, but we understood the importance of civility. So, Rabbi, you're asking me the state of the union through my eyes. First, I must tell you, we are all so blessed to live in the United States. It's a great country. My grandparents came here in the early 1900s. My grandfather started a very small grocery store in downtown Baltimore City. It grew to become the largest privately held retail food establishment in the United States. That's the American dream. And now their grandson serves in the United States Senate. This is the greatest country. We can express our views. You can come here and disagree with Rabbi Wohlberg. You may not get a good seat for the high holy days, but you're not going to end up in jail. You can practice your religion. You can do what you want to do as long as you don't hurt other people. And you know that you can do that with safety. In most of the places in the world, it's not the case. The State of the Union, we're blessed, but there are very troubling signs here in America. On the partnership between the United States and Israel, Israel needs the unconditional support of the United States because it is isolated among the world communities. There's a significant rise of anti-Semitism around the world and here in the United States. We need to have unity on the importance of having a Jewish state. And yet we find it legitimate in some quarters to question the legitimacy of Israel. The rise of the BDS movement, which is embedded in anti-Zionism. We have challenges in America to make sure we maintain the strong support for Israel. We have problems in our commitment to help others. I am proud of what we've done. We're extremely generous. We do so many things to help other people. But when I was in college, the United States, among the industrial nations in the world, had the narrowest gap between the wealthy and the poor. Now, among the industrial nations in the world, we have the widest gap between the wealthy and the poor. We have a shrinking middle class, which is not healthy for democracy. We have to pay attention to that. To come along, repairing the world. Just look at COVID-19 and how well we were not prepared to deal with that pandemic. Look at global climate change. And yes, we're taking steps today, but in many respects, it's already too late. We're paying a heavy price for not paying attention to protecting the world. And civility, I don't have to tell you about that. The Rabbi's already mentioned it. This is, to me, one of the greatest challenges we have as a nation. We're now picking our friends by their political beliefs. We won't have conversations with certain people. We don't listen to each other. We have people who believe unbelievable things that have no basis whatsoever, whether it has to deal with COVID-19 or has to deal with the validity of the election. We can't even listen to each other today, which puts our democracy at great risk. So, Rabbi, I come here saying that we live in the greatest nation, the State of the Union is strong, but we have challenges that we have to deal with. And I really do think that my roots grounded here in the Jewish community of Baltimore, nurtured at Bethel, has prepared me well for the challenges I face as the United States Senator. And I think it's prepared our members well in their activism in our community to make sure that we continue to grow from generation to generation with strength. Thank you. Now your friendly questions.
All right, listen, I don't want I don't want to make this too controversial or anything, so we're going to just discuss power of the issues. What's doing with Alexis Ocasio-Cortez these days? No, is this, people feel that this is symptomatic of a change in America, and even more so of a change within the Democratic Party.
So I'm going to disagree with that. AOC represents a view that I strongly disagree with. So I don't think that surprises anyone here. But because we have such a closely divided Congress among Democrats and Republicans, the margin in the Senate is 0 for 50-50. The margin in the House is 6 votes. So that every member that wants to be difficult can exercise much greater influence than that person should. And AOC has influence because she has a following, not a big following, but it can affect certain issues. But when you look at the support among the Democrats, and I'm going to tell you also the Republicans, there is strong support for the U.S.-Israel relations on every issue that we care the most about: funding the Memorandum of Understanding, Iron Dome, David Sling, taking on Iran, fighting BDS. Every issue you want, we have strong support in both parties. And what I just urge us all not to fall trap to, we never want to encourage a partisan division and using Israel as a partisan wedge issue. If we do that, Israel loses. We should celebrate the strength that we have, recognize there are people there that we disagree with. We'll do our best to educate them, best to work with them, and when we can't get their support, we'll work around them. And we can only do that if we maintain strong support in both parties.
It was interesting on the issue of Iron Dome funding, where she was part of the problem. We tend to overlook the fact that the eventual vote was something like 409 to 6 or something. Is there something about us that we tend to worry more than is necessary?
No, it's part of our DNA to worry. It's good. I want us all to continue to be concerned about this. But you're absolutely correct. The proof's in the final vote. The final vote is what matters. And the fact that we only lost 6 votes on the replenishment of the funds for Iron Dome in the House speaks volumes. Now, our margin in the Senate is 99-1. We have one senator who is not support, has to be a Republican member of the Senate, that will not support Iron Dome. So we can't move it by unanimous consent. So we're going to put it on a different document. We have 99 senators who every single Democrat is going to support the replenishment in the Senate. So we're really blessed to have strong support today that we should be concerned about, because there are forces out there that are trying to undermine that support. We do have the challenges of the protracted debate between the Palestinians and the Israelis and the peace process and the 2 states and all the consequences that come with that. We really need to find a pathway for peace and a lasting solution. That would go a long way. In the meantime, we're working around that. Abraham Accord, what an incredible opportunity that is. I've met with the ambassadors of the Abraham Accord countries. Myrna and I will be in UAE in a couple of weeks to meet, to thank them for what they're doing. We'll also be in Israel to underscore the importance of these arrangements. So we have to work on building these issues, but I hope we always are concerned about making sure we maintain support. So therefore, continue your advocacy, continue to work with pro-Israel groups. Rabbi Wohlberg and I both agree on the importance of AIPAC. We need to continue to work to support U.S.-Israel relations.
What do you attribute the growth of anti-Semitism in the world?
Well, the growth of anti-Semitism is also connected with the growth of bigotry, hatred, and it, to me, is rooted in what we generally call nationalism. And that is, we don't like people who are different. And there's a significant number of Americans who look at America as being a white Christian society. And anyone that doesn't fit that mold, even though, by the way, that's the minority in our country. Anyone who looks at that finds hatred in people who are different. And we saw that in Charlottesville. We saw that in our mosques against the Muslim community. We've seen it against the Black community. We've seen it against the Jewish community. And internationally, we see a rise of nationalism. You see that in so many countries that we thought were moving towards democracy. Look at what's happening in Hungary today, where President Orban used a direct anti-Semitic campaign for his election for president. So it is the rise of nationalism that fuels the mainstream anti-Semitic type activities. And by the way, it's more dangerous than ever. It's more violent.
Let me ask you personalities. You've known Joe Biden for many years. What kind of person?
Joe Biden's a regular guy. I mean, he really is. He's a product of the political system. He grew up in a working family community. He was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when I first got there. And he has a love for foreign policy. He loves the schmooze. He loves relationships. He's very personable. He reaches out. He's never really been a partisan. He believes in working together. By the way, for those of you who know my background, I was given a lot of credit for a very successful run in the Maryland General Assembly as Speaker of the House, which led to my election to Congress. I was able to have a successful run because I was able to get Democrats and Republicans to work together. I was able to get things done now. But that's how Joe Biden. Joe Biden was able to get Democrats and Republicans working together. He had a lot of friends on both sides of the aisle. So he decided to run for president. I really believe it because of Donald Trump. He was really worried about democracy. And so you understand why he's so committed to build back better. He is worried that if we don't deal with the dissatisfaction that's out in our community, the real deep dissatisfaction. If you're in a family where both parents are working, they have a couple young children, they can't afford childcare, so it hardly pays for them to work. I mean, they have good jobs, but it hardly pays to work. They can't take off from work for family emergencies because they won't get paid or they'll lose their job. This is the pressure that American families are facing today. So Joe Biden took this job, I think, to try to preserve our democracy. And he is really committed to this. If you have a chance to talk with him, and this is Democrats and Republicans, I really think he wanted to do everything in a bipartisan way. He's very happy about the bipartisan infrastructure deal. I've talked to him about that. And by the way, if you want to ask him a question, we'll be here tomorrow night and we'll get you there. But he's a regular, to me, he is so much different than Barack Obama. He's so much different than Donald Trump. He really is, and I say that, had a great respect for Barack Obama, but Barack Obama was not a person who was warm and fuzzy when you were sitting having a conversation. Joe Biden was. He's a guy I'd like to have in Chicago.
Did you have a relationship with Donald Trump?
No. I tried to.
That close?
I tried to. During his first year in the presidency, I had a couple of, I needed his help on a foreign policy issue, and I invited to the White House for lunch with the president, a small group. I went to one of his supporters and I said, if I want to get Donald Trump to do something for me, what do I do? And the person I went to said, pay him a high compliment as soon as you meet him. You'll have him on your side. And I did that. And I got what I wanted from him. The way that he treats people, I was there another time for a bill that I worked on that he was signing, and he used that to sort of embarrass me by having a news conference on something I totally disagreed with him on. After about 6 months that he was in office, he's not someone I wanted to be with, and I couldn't work with him. And by the way, he never invited me to the White House. He never invited Republicans. He was under President Bush, I was in the White House at least once a month. Under Barack Obama, at least once a month. Under Donald Trump, I was invited to the White House maybe a dozen times over 4 years.
Outside of Trump and Biden, I remember growing up, we used to speak about how Lyndon Johnson and Everett Dirksen used to fight on the Senate floor, and then at night went out for drinks. The Republicans and Democrats now are politically so divided. After 5 o'clock, are they also divided?
No.
They're not.
Not in the Senate. In the Senate, we're friends. And we meet frequently, and we go over business. I met earlier today with Susan Collins, Republican from Maine, and we are working on a major bill to help small businesses. And we have to work around the ranking member, who happens to be Rand Paul, who I can't seem to get to do much at all. And we're going to work around him, and we're going to have a bipartisan group, and we're going to be able to pass our bill. One of my closest friends in the Senate, Roger Wicker from Mississippi, a Republican. We work together every day, including today, today was on freedom of the media to help imprison journalists in Turkey, to do something about that. Rob Portman will be traveling with me to Israel, with us, Republican from Ohio. I just go down the list. So no, we're friends.
You see, we don't know that. The American people are given a picture that this is a fight to the finish, and each side is trying to knock the other one off. We have no sense that beyond this, there is a close, friendly, personal relationship, which would make people feel much better.
Well, I must tell you that if you go to the highest leadership of Congress, I don't think they're very friendly with each other. I don't think they talk about it. I think their staffs know, but there's not the personal relationship that was between the Tip O'Neill and Bob Michael. We don't have that type of relationship today between Nancy Pelosi and McCarthy. They're not friends. But between Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, they don't like each other. So I think
they really don't like each other.
So that's the problem. The top leaders are really difficult to communicate back. Well, each will blame the other. And some of the most interesting discussions I have with my Republican colleagues is that my Republican colleagues really believe it's Chuck Schumer's fault. I tell you, my Democratic colleagues really believe it's Mitch McConnell's fault. So we haven't been able to break that. But I must tell you, there are very few senators I don't have a close personal relationship with. There are a few, not many. A couple Democrats that don't have a good relationship.
I hate to put you on the spot, but do you think the election was stolen?
You know, it's worth talking about this. We have problems in our elections, but I had to pick what I think is the most challenging part of the integrity of our election, the way we finance elections. I think that is. But as far as the integrity of people who are eligible to vote, who are not eligible to vote, having voted, It doesn't exist in any significant numbers in this country. We've done audits of this over and over and over again. When we look at the number of votes that should have been cast that were not cast because of different reasons, there are far, far more votes that never get counted that should have been counted than votes that were fraudulently cast. So this election was absolutely one of the most heavily anticipated elections in the history of America, with no amount of significant fraud whatsoever, with a clear victory for Joe Biden. So unlike what you could talk about in the Gore election or some other elections, that you could argue that maybe there was enough mistakes made on voting chads and things like that that could have swayed the election. There's nothing in this election that would have made a difference. And Donald Trump has done a major disservice to our democracy by raising this issue. He has convinced a significant number of Americans that this election was stolen. We're not going to change their minds. And it really is compromising our democracy and the confidence in our democracy and America's leadership globally. And if you talk to the members of the Senate on the Republican side of the aisle, I don't think there's more than a half a dozen, and that's only because they have certain ambitions that they can't look at things objectively, that would believe there was any shenanigans at all that were worthwhile reviewing in this past election. So I don't think this is an issue that is something we should gloss over. I think it is going to go down in our history books as one of the darkest moments in America's democracy.
All right, let's go to something more pleasant. Iran.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that.
I can read one day in the Haaretz newspaper that they're 3 months away. And I can read one day in the Jerusalem Post an interview with the former head of the Mossad. They're not even close.
So, as I think people here know, I was against the Iran nuclear, and I was against President Trump taking America out of it. I feel very strongly about both of those positions, and I'm more than happy to talk about my reasons why. And I think I'm correct on both. I had a chance this week to meet with the Director General of the IAEA, which is the monitoring arm of Iran's nuclear program. Mr. Grossi is a really good person. He levels with us. We were in a closed setting, although it wasn't pleasant. So I can talk about it, but I'll talk about it in some generalities. There is no question. Let's go back before the nuclear, JCPOA, the nuclear. Iran had a large quantity of nuclear material. They had the equipment, they had the technology, and they were months away from the nuclear weapon. At that time, it was the intelligence community believed it was unclear whether Iran wanted to complete the nuclear weapon or not. They wanted to be able to do it, but it wasn't clear whether they actually wanted to have it. Under the JCPOA, they were restricted in the amount of nuclear material they had, so they had to give up a lot of their nuclear material. They couldn't modernize their centrifuges. And the breakout time was estimated to be about 1 year. Since U.S. pulled out of it, Iran has withdrawn from the advanced protocol, so therefore there's no longer inspectors in Iran. They've increased their amount of nuclear material. And more problematic, they've increased their technology, their centrifuges are much more efficient today than they were, which is, by the way, a violation of the JCPOA. So I think it's accurate to say they're within months of being able to break out to a nuclear weapon. They have the same mixed understanding as to whether they're going to put together a nuclear weapon or not. So we have the second best intelligence information. Israel has the best intelligence information. There is very, very, very close collaboration between Israel, the United States, the IAEA, and other interested parties. Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. They won't. And we will be part of efforts to make sure that never happens. I am not optimistic we're going to be back into a nuclear agreement with Iran anytime soon. But I can tell you we are monitoring the situation on a daily basis. And I can assure you, although Israel will never acknowledge this, Israel will take steps to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. And the United States will be cooperative with Israel to make sure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
Well, originally, if I remember correctly, when Israel bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor, I believe Reagan was in office then, and he punished Israel. Am I correct?
There was some, that was an open process. I don't think that was done with knowledge by the United States. Look, there's been, I don't have the information, but there's been widely reported that Israel just had kinetic action against Iran in regards to the facilities that do the centrifuges. Everybody believes Israel did this. There's been no repercussions at all by any of us against Israel. Now, again, it has not been, they have not acknowledged responsibility. But I think we all believe it's Israel.
Do any of you have any questions? Look how many votes you have. Yes, John.
I wanted to know what the compliment was that you gave to Donald Trump.
Because he's going to try it on me. Don't do it. Don't do it.
I don't remember what it was. I really don't remember what it was. I think it had to do with something with Israel, if I remember correctly. But I want you to know it didn't work beyond that one question I asked him for help. Because when it came to dessert, for lunch, and he had his famous chocolate cake he gave to everybody at lunch, I got the smallest slice.
But the bottom line is, I mean, he did do everything right by Israel. What do you think motivated him?
See, I don't think he did everything right by Israel. The Abraham Accords, I strongly agreed with. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem, I strongly agreed with. So the things that he did, I thought were right. But I thought he jeopardized America's credibility in dealing with some of the issues that we could have done better to help Israel in global affairs. So I think he was not as effective as America could have been in some of the issues that we confronted internationally. And America's strength was very much compromised among our allies during the Trump administration. I can tell you that directly. I have meetings with our traditional allies. And that weakened our leverage over our allies in working with us on issues that have been better handled for Israel.
Yes.
The reason there's a different view is that Israel is in that neighborhood. Iran wants to blow Israel up. Iran can't reach the continental of the United States, that's for sure. And we have stronger defenses. They're getting close to us. So we don't see a direct threat against our territory. Israel sees their existence in jeopardy if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So I think and the United States has other areas of concern. North Korea. North Korea has nuclear weapons. They have them. And those nuclear weapons can reach areas of major national security threat to the United States. So we have that to worry about. So we have other issues we have to be concerned about. I have had enough personal conversations, and there's been enough public statements made by President Biden, by Secretary of State Blinken, and others that have made it clear that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, and that the United States will do everything to make sure that does not happen. And you can read in between the lines. And I think it's our hope that we will have international activities that will prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon, that we will not have to use military action. But I don't think we have ruled that out. We don't think we ruled that out. But I think the United States would prefer that to come from the Western allies rather than Israel. So I think those conversations. What's that?
I wanted to say that the Senate, came to Washington and talked to President Biden about Iran. And when he went to Israel, they were saying that they really didn't get much about, that's what was the main thing that he did.
You should, let me answer this question. Every day, I read the Jerusalem Post, Haaretz, Ynet, which is Yediot Ahronoth, Haaretz Sheva, and Israel Hayom. No, these are all available in English. They're all available in English. In Hebrew, I read the Modeh, but everything else. And I want you to know what you just said is what is said in one newspaper, but it's not said in the other newspaper. You see, and this is very frustrating. We were discussing this before. And we don't really know what's going on. We really don't. Because you can have Israel Hayom where the Negev are going to be satisfied with what Biden said, and you can have Haaretz, which is never going to be satisfied with what Trump said, and you can have Haaretz Sheva, which is never going to be satisfied with what the non-Orthodox say. And you get the party line all the time from all of these newspapers and from all of the experts. They run, and it wasn't always like this. Today, if somebody tells you they're a Republican, the chances are pretty good that they don't believe there's a danger of climate change, that they're not sure that you need to take a vaccine, or there's a good chance that the election was stolen. Was it? We're talking in broad terms. If somebody identifies themselves as a Democrat, they're going to be in favor of critical race theory. And I mean, we can go down the list. Nobody is thinking anymore. We're all stuck in our preconceived notions, and the Israeli newspapers are 100% an example of that. But we don't have to go to the Israeli newspapers. I get delivered every day to my house the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and USA Today. And it's as if I'm living in different countries. So when we say he came back and he didn't get what he wanted, that depends on who you're reading. There were others who said he was very satisfied.
That's from the television.
So there's, Rabbi, you should get, you should get Politico and Wohlberg. Read those two.
I get Politico. I read Politico every day. I read The Hill. No, I want to tell you something. I have to say, to my everlasting credit, I'm a very humble person. I don't usually say this, but I read papers that I don't agree with 80% of the time. I read the National Review every day. I read The Spectator, that's an English magazine, which is very conservative. On the other hand, I read Bulwark, which is very liberal. I get every week, I read David French. I mean, I can go down the list. I spend hours every day reading because I love this stuff. You're looking at two different worlds, depending on whose eyes you're looking through.
So I had a chance to meet with Israel ambassador to the United States during the.
What does he know?
He's a good person. And I also had a chance to meet with the opposition leader, the former mayor of Jerusalem, Rabbi. So I've had a chance to meet those who would be critical of the Bennett government as well as potentially supporting what President Trump is doing versus President Biden. And I don't get that sense that there is a concern. I think there's great comfort among the Israelis that President Biden understands the Middle East. He really understands it. Joe Biden's strength is in foreign policy. He knows foreign policy. He knows the players. He knows the risk factors. So I also know when Vice President Biden disagreed with President Obama, at the time I was ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I was involved in a lot of White House conversations. And I know the differences between the Vice President and the President at that time. I would not at all believe that President Biden would hesitate in doing what he thinks is important for our national security. I mean that. So I think he is.
I'm going to show you how Senator Cardin doesn't necessarily follow a party line. What do you think of John Kerry?
Well, I think he's doing what he really wants to do. He's doing the climate agenda. It's a good thing for him to do it. We'll be with him also. I'm also going to Glasgow for the climate talks in about 10 days. John Kerry is an interesting guy.
We once had a conversation, which is why I asked the question.
Yeah. I think I'm going to pass. No, John was also chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. I served on. Obviously, former Secretary of State. We are personal friends. We have different views on different subjects. He tried to undermine some of my major bills, including the Magnitsky statute. He tried to undermine by getting it passed, but I got it passed. So
That's what counts.
that's right. So, but I think he really has the position he wanted all his life. He really feels passionate about climate issues. I think he could be pretty persuasive.
We'll take one more. Go ahead.
Senator, thank you for fighting for our values in the real estate. Also fighting for Americans. So I'm always feeling our days in the House of Capacity and likewise bill. Both are very similar to the West Coast. What's in it for Americans?
No, that's for John Cardin. You should be asking the question.
There's a lot of good stuff in there. Thank you, Ari. I appreciate the question. The bipartisan infrastructure bill is baked. That's going to stay the way it is. It's not going to change. It will pass, just a matter of when. It's the largest increase in infrastructure in the history of America. It is important for us because it provides us significant predictability on our transit systems. It provides us substantial resources, and for example, reconnecting communities with Wohlberg get fixed under it. There's a lot of important projects we have in Maryland on transit, roads, bridges that we think will be taken care of under the bipartisan infrastructure package. We also have money for Chesapeake Bay in there, a significant amount of money for Chesapeake Bay. There are a lot of Maryland-specific funds. I chair the infrastructure subcommittee of the Environment and Public Works Committee, and our committee wrote the bill. That's a bipartisan bill on transportation and on water. On water, we get rid of all the lead pipes, which to me is, some of our schools in Baltimore still have lead pipes. We can't use drinking water. We get rid of those issues. So there's a lot of really good things in the infrastructure bill to modernize our infrastructure. The bipartisan, the budget reconciliation budget, you hear the numbers 3.5, you hear the numbers 2 trillion. These are 10-year numbers, by the way. It's going to be principally focused, if we get it done, on helping American families. It's going to deal with the cost of childcare. It's going to deal with family and medical leave. It's going to deal with healthcare expansions, particularly Medicare for vision, dental, and hearing. It's going to be those affordability issues for American families. It will have a major sector on climate change, particularly on the tax code, to provide tax incentives for energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. Will be very heavy in those particular areas. Investments in conservation, which will again help the Chesapeake Bay. There's additional monies in there for the Chesapeake Bay. And then there will be a tax relief for American families, particularly with the child credit and the earned income tax credit, so that we can continue to keep families that are working out of poverty. That's the main parts that are going to be in the reconciliation budget if we get it done. I would say the odds are right now better than 50-50. We will get it done within the next 10 days.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we got our money's worth. So, it was nice having this time of this centennial year with our true native son and favorite son. And we really thank you so much for being with us this evening. We love seeing Verna here. We love seeing Deborah here. Deborah played a very important role in the development of the timeline. Oh, I'm embarrassed, but I'm really sorry. But she did. And we invite all of you to come back with us next week when we're having as our guests Daniel Gordis, and actually make quite an interesting discussion about Israel and its relationship with us, with American Jews. So all of you take care, be well. Thank you for coming, and for all of you watching out there, thanks for being with us. See you next week.